Ladies and gentlemen, the program is about to begin. Please take a moment to silence your mobile devices. We would like to remind you that food and drink are not permitted in the theater. Also, please note that photography and audio and video recording is prohibited. Thank you.
Good evening, there we go. Good evening, everyone. I'm Michelle Gray, the Director of Programming for the New York Times live conversation series TimesTalks, which pairs New York Times journalists with the brightest and boldest creative minds from the fields of film, theater, music, science, art, literature, and fashion. I'm delighted to welcome you to tonight's TimesTalks Downtown, presented by Cadillac, live here in New York and live on the New York Times Facebook page and timestalks.com. Please join us for a cocktail reception at the end of tonight's program. We're thrilled to be welcoming 7-time Emmy Award winner Allison Janney, Tony Award winner John Benjamin Hickey, rising star Corey Hawkins, and renowned playwright John Guare, all here to celebrate the critically acclaimed play 6 Degrees of Separation, written by Guare, which returned to Broadway last month with rave reviews. You'll hear much more about tonight's guest from our esteemed moderator, New York Times editor and critic Alexandra Jacobs. Please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Alexandra Jacobs, Allison Janney, John Benjamin Hickey, and John Guare.
Wow.
Paid?
Some came in Cadillacs, I think. Anyway, I want to thank you all for coming. This is a very meaningful occasion for me because I have worshipped the writing of John's writing since I was a wee lass of 14 years old when I first saw House of Blue Leaves, and then I saw the original production of 6 Degrees of Separation at Lincoln Center. So it is an absolute privilege to be here and to have actually seen both that original production and the most recent one that we're discussing tonight. I guess I would start then. I think, Corey, you were about 2 years old when
Tell everybody.
Yeah.
Parents hadn't even met yet.
Exactly, just a twinkle in the eye. But maybe other John down at the end there.
Not 2 years.
Yeah, you were not 2 years old. So why don't I think we've confirmed who among this group is middle aged. So why don't we start with your
Thanks for clearing that up.
your experience with 6
Having seen it, I think I might be the only actor here tonight who saw the original production. Yes. And your question about it was it good? It was pretty damn. It was one of the indelible nights of theater going in my life. It was a seminal thing. It was a very important play at the time, just personally, because I was a student just coming out of drama school at Juilliard. It was playing right next door. I couldn't get an audition to play one of the kids, but a classmate of mine was cast in it, and I didn't think she was half as good as I was.
Laura Linney.
Laura Linney. Yeah, Laura Linney. But that's true. Laura is not the person I was talking about. But Laura was in it as an understudy. So it was just a play that meant the world to me. And when this opportunity came up 25 years later, I went to read the play again thinking it would be the same play, and it was a completely different play because I was a completely different person. And that was the reason. And then when I talked to the brilliant director of this production, Trip Cullman, who's sitting right here. I had known Trip and admired his work for a long time, and he told me his idea for the production, and it sounded completely different than the original, and that was the only thing I didn't want to do, is some kind of imitation or pale impression of what had come before. So, you know, the play is alive. The play is very much alive, and a different play now than it was then.
Well, since you two didn't see the original, then I guess I would pose to you, John, if I may be so familiar. What was behind the decision to revive it at this particular moment?
Oh, me? Oh,
Yeah,
me,
you.
oh, me,
You, John. That's what I'm calling you now. Yes, Mike.
What was the decision? I was just talking to Stuart Thompson, and he said, let's do it. But I only wanted to do it with Allison Janney. I wasn't interested in a revival. And we both, Stuart and I, both felt the same way independently about Allison Janney. And we felt that we would only want it, and if we couldn't get her, we would maybe put it off for another time. And then we called Allison, and indeed she was available. And for a director, again, what made me, I mean, Stuart is, you know, on a happy production, one of the reasons for happy production is that right at the very top, and Stuart Thompson is one of the most remarkable producers to work for because he's honest and decent and listens and tells the truth. What? And he said that he's had his eye on a young director that he felt should have a chance on Broadway, and that was Trip Cullman. Not knowing that I had seen a production that Trip had done in San Diego a few years before of 6 Degrees of Separation, that absolutely blew me away because he found a new narrative in the play that surprised me, without changing anything. He just revealed a structure in the play that I had not seen, and so we did the play because Allison was available and Trip was available, and then we wanted Hickey to be in it, and thanks to Daniel Swee, our great casting director, he said, well, you have Corey Hawkins, television, 24. And then it turned out he'd been in a production of mine at Juilliard, at Blue Leaves when they did it at Juilliard, in the most important role of the MP. Yes.
I thought it was.
Yeah.
I had one line,
right.
and I couldn't.
But then we met Corey, and he came into his audition wearing a pink shirt and just gave the performance you're seeing now. And it was thrilling. So it just came together all terrifically. Yes, I mean, I think, and then also I wish Trip were up here right now.
Well, he could be. I mean, I could vacate this seat.
No. And I wish Mark Wendland could be here. I wish you have a hand for our set designer because it's a very, very tricky play to design. And, you know, a long time ago, Tony Walton did a terrific production. I remember he said Tony couldn't figure out how to design it, and he read the play, and he came up, he said, I finally solved it. There's a line in the play, every door opens, every new person is a door opening up into a new world. So the play was filled with doors, mysterious doors. So I knew what we didn't want it to be. And Mark just found something equally mysterious and beautiful and utterly lavish. And so it's been and with Clinton Ramos and Ben Stanton, we've just had, it's been, somebody once said, you know, a good production is when everybody involved is telling the same story, and that's what happened on this production. So I'm a lucky guy to have had not one, but 2 perfect productions of my play in my lifetime, and that's why I'm happy to be here. I'm just express my, it's not a gush, it's not showbiz lovey. It really is genuinely, you say, this is what you live for, and to work with these people. And the rest of the cast is wonderful. So, and it's a big cast, and when you see it, everybody's surprised how many people are lining up for the curtain call. And that didn't scare Stuart either.
Yeah.
It's a bigger cast than I remembered. You know, I remembered the triad, and then in this production, I feel the other players are more assertive. The kids are. Why don't we get David? Can we get a look at the set for those who haven't? Thank you. Just so people can get it. The few in this room have not seen it yet.
Well, it sort of doesn't. You have to see it in the theater because with the lights, it keeps changing mysteriously at all times. It keeps changing from a farce to something menacing to something delicious to no. I mean, it's a wonderful set that has no fixed identity as as is everybody's problem in the play. And
Yeah. So I guess maybe, Allison, I'd like to ask you, well, I'd like to ask all of you, but let's start with Allison. Okay. Aside from the sort of rapid fire nature of John's dialogue, which was what I fell in love with as a 14-year-old New Yorker, that, you know, people were talking the way I heard New Yorkers speak. So I'm assuming that's difficult, but I wonder what is most difficult about doing this play for each of you, either emotionally or just in terms of...
I think I've always loved the rapid fire dialogue. I'm not afraid of that. I love it. I embrace it. It's what I love about his writing so much. But it is terrifying. I had to deal with a lot of stage fright coming back to Broadway after a while, and like, oh my, it was kind of overwhelming. And I was very grateful to
did you have to change your acting? Is your acting... What's the main difference between your working?
Well, it's a high wire act without a net going out on Broadway. And I've been in television and movies for a while, and you can say, I don't like that take, let's stop in the middle of it. And once you start, you're out there, and it's exhilarating, and it's one of the things I've always loved about Broadway, the fluidity of your experience as an actor. It's yours for the night, whatever it's going to be. It's caught in that moment with the audience, and how important the audience is. I mean, I directly address every single audience, and it's terrifying and exhilarating. And there are moments of the play that, there are three very different styles of within this hour and a half. It's so dense, and it washes over me every night. And the ability at the end of this play, I have to stand there and be completely naked and let it hit me and be truthful in no matter where I am in that moment, and that's
for the record,
terrifying.
she's not actually the naked one in the play.
I am not.
Just
I emotionally, it really requires every part of me as an actress is challenged in this play. Every single part, more than anything I've ever done before, and it's incredibly rewarding and just such an honor that John wanted me to do this. I start crying because it's really meant a lot to me, and that, you know, my dear friend John Hickey, who we've been together, we're the you know, the Lunts.
yes,
our own
we're going to
minds.
be
The Fitzgeralds in our own
How many
minds.
times have you been married now?
I mean, we've had so many
And that was most
marriages,
advantageous because we started, speaking of rapid fire, and speaking of the fact that he was 2, but we weren't 25 years ago, we started working on it together in November. We started working, October, November.
We started learning our lines because we knew we were over
Old.
30,
Yeah.
and we were going to have to hit the ground running. So.
Yeah,
I wish I knew that.
Yeah.
no sympathy.
UK, you know, he was doing lines with us via Skype.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the newfangled technologies of the millennials. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So, Corey, had you studied John's work at Juilliard? What was your kind of background in his, before you came to this?
Guarism.
Yes, yes, oeuvre.
I had, like John said, my first year at Juilliard was very scary and very nerve-wracking, and I was sort of rediscovering myself as an actor and as a human and all of this craziness. And they asked me to be in House of Blues, and I was like, amazing! Who do I get to play? And they were like, the MP, and I was like, and I freaked out because I loved the play and I loved John's work, and I read his work since high school as well. And so I just remember I had one line in that play, and I could never, it was the bane of my existence.
What was the line? Do you remember?
It was like, you're
now under. It's what they say in the MP when they arrest somebody. I mean, he's arresting
you are
somebody. It's the official.
official. Oh God, I can't remember it now. Couldn't remember it then, and I can't remember it now. Oh goodness! But just the inflection, and you are now under I just could not. It was just actor in your head kind of thing, and he would walk around the halls, and I would just be in awe. And I remember very vividly, he would walk around with Marion Seldes, who was there as well, and it was just one of those moments where I just dreamed of the opportunity to work with John again. And then I met Trip. We sat down and we talked about this play, and I don't know if I had told you, but like I read the play before I knew it was coming back to Broadway. I read it recently while I was working. We were shooting Kong, Skull Island, and I just remember just reading the play and falling in love with it again, and falling in love with this character, and falling in love with the enigma that is Paul and what he represents, and the beauty that he sort of brings in chaos, but the beauty, you know, it's sort of that duality that he brings into this world, and I was just thrilled to be able to do this and work with this team, and I felt really lucky. And then it was like day one, and we all had to get it together.
Wow.
But you know, I'm on stage with these veterans who I look up to, and now I love and I call friends and my peers, and as John say, I feel like a lucky guy, a really, really lucky guy. And it's like, if I may say, like when you talk about the rapid fire of it, I'm a huge jazz fan, and I've always been in jazz. I can't play or do it, but I admire that the jazz and the musicality and John's lyrics, his words.
Yeah. They're like lyrics.
They are like,
You know,
lyrics.
it's like
Yeah.
it's like we're doing a music. I don't know, but it's beautiful to fall in love with that all over again.
I felt like I was doing a musical, and then when we went through tech, it was the long. I did 9 to 5 years ago, but this tech was more intense than music. I mean, there were so many lighting cues and so many cool music that it's
So
quite
stylized.
Incredibly.
So I'm assuming that there's a certain amount of familiarity in this room with the play, and you know, I think that's a fairly safe assumption. But just a quick recap, which is that because I wanted to bring up David Hampton, the con man who really did pretend to be Sidney Poitier's son, on whom Corey's character is based, and who died of AIDS in 2003. And I wondered, you know, what your feelings are about this complicated figure. You know, who was acquitted of harassing you, but certainly
He wasn't acquitted.
wasn't he?
He ran away.
He ran away. Very elusive, strange, fascinating person who I felt a little bit haunted.
Evil.
Yeah, yeah. So
If I had known all the things that I found out about him before I wrote the play, I wouldn't have been able to write the play.
wow, wow.
And yes, he was monstrous.
Yeah.
Monstrous.
This is why I kind of want to close my.
Yeah.
Because you encouraged me to not read.
To
it
not
about him,
research.
Because I
Yes.
have to fall. I fell in love with.
Yes,
his
so
character.
it's,
Yeah.
But how it's bled into this edition of the play is whether it's Corey as a musician is absorbing it, is that there is a much more menacing side to him in this encouraged by Trip. That because of what I told them, what I had learned subsequently about him, that he tried to kill my wife and myself. I mean, so I don't have it was terrible death threats, plus a suit for $100 million. It was insane, and then he jumped bail during the trial and left. And so knowing the things that, and then the other people who came forward, the DA's office, when I had an order of protection against him, the DA's office brought me in and they said, well, and I remember there was like 6 or 8 assistant DAs sat around me, and they said, what gives you a right to have an order of protection against this man? I said, well, he's threatened to kill me. I killed John Guare, spray painted on my wife's door, and then left a death threat on the answering machine. I said, and they said, well, maybe he has every right to. You wrote. I said, it's not about him. It's my fantasy about him. It's what I read in the New York Post about him, and what a friend, had told me about him that it had happened to, and they badgered me for an hour and a half. And I said, you know what? I said, I'm out of here. I said, you guys are my enemies. I thought you were my friends, and I come to you for help. And it's like a Kafka play that you won't, that you won't. And they said, sit down, we'll take the case. They wanted to see if I would break, because
Wow.
they had had at least 35 to 40 people coming in for orders of protection against him, but they would never continue with it because he would get them to do something so embarrassing, he would involve them, that they would not report him.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I was the first person who didn't care what he said, and so it was a mess. And then a number of years, when he vanished during the trial, he was gone for a couple of years, and then I got a call from the Boston Globe, and they said, "Has he shown up yet?" And they said, "What?" They said, "He's been in prison. He's got out on bail, and he's jumped bail." And the last thing he heard was he was coming to New York to kill John Guare. So, wow, it was all the gift that won't stop giving, you know.
Yeah.
And so I alerted the police, you know, again, I don't know what, you know, just was careful. And then a woman called me up one night, and she said, "You owe me money. I'm so distraught." I said, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" She said, I was in a bodega on 96th Street. It was pouring rain, and this young man was there, and he asked me for money. He had no money, and I said, "Where are you staying?" He said, "No place." He said, "John Guare has stolen my life, and I'm coming. He's giving me everything." And she said, "I took him into my house, you know, and he stole everything from me. He's taken everything from me, and and it's all thanks to you." Oh, I said, "Well, it's not anyway." And then a little while later, a columnist in the Times called me, and they said, "Oh, David Hampton died yesterday. Do you have anything to say?" I said, "Yes, he was a man of great brilliance who was completely misguided in life and completely amoral and immoral and dangerous, and he was on an attempted murder. He was getting the ante was up, because up in Boston he was up on attempted murder charges that he convinced the judge to let him off with no bail." And I said, "He was a force of evil and chaos." And he said, "Well, we're taking a different tack on it, the Times. I'm biting the hand. I'm biting the hand that's taking us." But in the Times came out the next day with a piece that said, you know, "A poor man who only wanted to be in died last night." Hope they didn't know anything. And anyways, I must say, I took a deep breath.
Yeah.
Because of relief. I pity the guy. The guy was obviously had some kind of extraordinary memory and genius abilities gathered from the people that he had manipulated and fooled, and he was and he had an evil streak in him that was, and I use that word not lightly, and maybe somebody. I don't know how you'd write a play about that person.
Yeah.
And I got it at the right time. The first time I heard anything about it was that we were in previews, and the play was just going great. And this is back in Lincoln Center. We were at the Missy Newhouse, and we just had about 4 or 5 performances. And a friend of mine came, and he said, "I hate this play." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "You don't know what this man did to me. He got into his house and kidnapped him, and they held him hostage, and he said, and you romanticized him." I said, "Well, I didn't know that about it." That was the first warning bell I got about this guy. And but that, so luckily I have my Paul, who has nothing to do, who I mean, this, you know, I mean, whatever was triggered.
Yeah, they're two different.
It happened to my friends Oz and Igor Elliott, who called me. I was in London. I was working in London. And they called me one morning, and they said, "We just arrived in London from New York on the overnight. We got a story to tell you." And I met them that night, and they told me what had happened to them 2 days before, and that their children didn't know this man. And then it happened. They told their other friends, and they realized the same thing had happened to them. And I said, "What a funny story." And then about 3 months later, I was back in New York, and I saw a New York Post headline: Sidney Poitier, imposter, you know, arrested, and he was arrested on some charges. And I saw it, and I said, "Oh, that's interesting." And I put it away. That was 1984. And I put it away. I never thought about it. I never thought it was.
Yeah.
And in 1989, while waiting for my wife and my brother-in-law to come from Virginia and Nantucket over Labor Day weekend. I was waiting for them, and I had to kill time. They both were late, and I started writing a thing that turned into 6 Degrees of Separation, which was written rather quickly. And like I'd been stewing it about the power of the unconscious, that's the life of a writer. You have to keep writing every day, which I do, but then if you're writing every day, you get these extra gifts that, without making it sound like Santa's workshop, that your unconscious is down there all the time trying to sort things out. And you have to, a writer's life is being there to catch it when it comes. And luckily, I caught it when it comes, and it's given me a life.
I ran into Jez Butterworth, the great playwright who wrote Jerusalem.
Oh, we got a great review today in the Times.
Oh, wonderful. He told me, he asked me what I was doing, and I said, I'm doing 6 Degrees, and he said, I read John's foreword to that play, the author's foreword to that play, a lot. He said, so do my other playwright friends. And we read it to remind ourselves that something might be growing, like when we were feeling, bankrupt or whatever. It's just a good reminder that maybe something's back there taking its time to, because it took you 7 years, it sounds like? 6, 7?
5 or 6 years, yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing.
But if Adele and her brother had come on time, I wouldn't have written.
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you, Adele.
That's right.
So let's hear it for bad traffic.
I've been curious if you cut or modified a single thing, because, I could see already certain lines sat differently this time around.
Oh, I love it. My favorite thing is when people say, oh, how much rewriting did you have to do to keep it so up to date? Nothing.
Nothing. But, you notice, like, for example, the Cosby line got a sort of rueful, knowing chuckle from the audience. And
because it's played brilliantly by the actors,
Yes.
directed by Trip Cullman.
Yeah.
Don't bury Cosby. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. You spoke. We were talking in the huddle room, as the green room here is called, because it's petite. We were discussing how the audience was responding in ways that surprised you to certain things. I thought maybe you actors could discuss that a little bit.
Oh yeah, what were we saying in there that people responding in ways that made us showing us insight into the play that we didn't as actors performing it, and once opening night happened, we were sort of on our own and performing this and having very different reactions from the audience every night, and certain people would come backstage, and like Richard Schiff, my friend from the West Wing, came and talked to Corey and myself after at Sardi's and told us
As one does.
As one does. It was just interesting hearing his perspective, because there was a certain part of the play where people were laughing, and we were both kind of upset about it. Like, why are they laughing? And I think he was showing us that. Can you say exactly? Because I'm not going to.
I don't want to misquote him either, but I think he was just was sort of talking about that there is a bit of a distance. The audience feels so close, but yet so far.
A Brechtian kind of distance between their experience of what ours is.
Well, what I heard we have a great Jill Cordell, our stage manager, writes reports every night. And my favorite report on the play is that in her big speech, when we're all connected, Eskimos and President, Queen, and she's searching. And she has a very close relation. Allison has a brilliant relation with the audience, and Allison is giving this speech, telling to the audience. And she said, 6 degrees, and she's searching, the phrase, and a woman goes up, oh, separation!
Oh, yeah, that was, thank you for that.
I almost forgot.
Thank you. I almost feel this play warrants that kind of interact, because when people answer me, I feel like I should, I'm like doing a stand-up routine, and I'm like, okay, thank you. Because they do it another time when I started the play, and I go, did he take anything? And someone said, no. And then I like, we better skip the next 4 lines. It's so funny when people do choose to talk back to us, but
that's what you do. You have that rapport. Actors who know how to play an audience is, that's as much as Stanislavski and all. actor student, all it is. It's all about the inner life. It's about, that's why I love performers who are essentially musical, because it's about knowing how to play it out there and to find your truth in the relation to the audience, not in excluding the audience.
Yeah.
But unlike most plays, this is a play, and you're talking about the challenging parts of acting it. It's a play you're telling to the audience, and you're also experiencing it. Yeah. So you turn out and you tell the audience part of the story, and then you go back into the play and you start experiencing it again. And so that turning on
I love that part of it.
I love it.
I'm oftentimes in my real life, I'm having a moment and I want to turn to some camera and go, can you believe it? I mean, I just want to turn and talk to somebody. Surely there's somebody who's listening, and it's
I would
fun.
watch that show.
And I noticed so much this time around the differences, the changes in technology have been so completely.
Yeah.
Well, if I wrote the play today, it would take place in about 5 minutes.
Yeah, I mean.
Oh, Google, no, he's not.
Right,
there.
exactly. The phones wouldn't be out, you know, they'd be texting, and exactly. So I'm curious generally how the experience of technology in our lives is changing playwriting for you.
Not at all. It's just a play that, I mean.
Well, not this, you know, it doesn't change this one, but sort of.
You've written another one. Can we announce that? No.
No.
Woo!
It's, no, I mean, people.
Inadvertent scoop.
I had a dream.
No, I mean, whatever's happening, there are plays written, imagine plays written before electricity. Yes. So,
Yeah.
I think, yes, I mean, I just think every play is reflective of its time.
Yes, yes. Yeah. I just, it's interesting how narrative has changed, because in this one, the phone calls are integral. The communication with the children is, which I think is brought out fascinatingly and wonderfully in this edition.
His entrance, I mean, the entrance at Trip stage of the children, it is never. That always gets entrance applause.
Yeah,
Mickey and Corey and I may not always get entrance applause, but those children get entrance applause.
Yeah,
It's fantastic.
it is choreography. I mean,
It's also interesting to note that he wrote this play 27 years ago, and that section of the play about the children, when I saw this play, it was like, oh, this is the way spoiled, rich, white, a very, very small section of the world acts, and I've never seen kids behave like that. That's how rich kids act. And now they're called millennials, and they're everywhere. And I think the audience, it's due to what Trip did brilliantly, but I think they instantly recognized that attitude in a way that is...
Well, Christine Lottie and Tommy Schlamme, my friend from West Wing, came to see the show. They saw the original production. They didn't have kids at that time. And seeing it, this production, it just took on a whole different meaning for them having kids. It just was incredibly powerful for them to see. It was a completely different experience, and that's what's kind of cool for people coming back to it the second time.
But I think it's pretty much what Orestes and Electra and were those Agamemnon kids. I think, yes, I mean, I think it, I think that they're all kids are generally pissed off. They've been around, whether Agamemnon and Clytemnestra or
Talbot
and
Woody.
Weezer.
Why you had to bring me into the world every night I hear Cody say it's just the most.
And husbands. I was very struck with how different John Cunningham's husband was, and how your husband was a very different sort of husband. That to me was, in a way, the most striking difference. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about how you came to that character, since you did see the original. You had to, unlike these guys.
I remember him vividly. He was brilliant in it. And that's one of the great things about this, is I really was, like, because I loved that first production so much, I questioned whether I could do it, but that's the great thing about the theater. I mean, I could have gone to Lincoln Center and watched it, I didn't, but it's like it lives in your heart, in your mind, like an old friend, like the best possible ghost. and we're both good friends with Stockard, and she's coming we don't want to know when she's coming, but and it just feels like it lives in me in a way that only the theater. Wednesday night.
And she's taking notes.
Yes, yes.
She's coming with a yellow pen.
She'll be like, of separation. I think I was, when I read it again, I just thought I just saw it in a completely new way. What I had not remembered, not because of anything they weren't or doing. I couldn't believe how much he was a hustler just like that guy. Everybody hand to mouth on a higher plateau is one of the great lines. Corey, you ask, are rich people like, he's like, no, and the Trent Conway's character goes, no, rich people are just hand to mouth on a higher plateau. And that's what these people are. They're struggling for a kind of identity and a family. It's a play about family too, as much as he is. They're looking for a family in many ways as much as he is, and looking for where the next thing is coming from. I don't know, so I just went from there. He's a gambler, a hustler, and I loved that about it. So I don't know, it just was my own take on it, and it's because the play is so great.
How do we think New York has changed since 1990, and how has it stayed the same? John, why don't we start with you?
Well,
it's still.
You were two.
It's still a marketplace. I mean, New York is the place where you go to buy or sell something. It's as simple as that. That's it. It's the biggest. We're an island. It's more expensive to live here. It's worth it. Everything is here, and people come here to get rid of something, to make something, to invent something. And that has never changed since whenever New Amsterdam. It's just a place where people sail in, and it's a great seaport, and so how it's changed all in real estate. I mean, I love Soho. I mean, look at us now. We're in a Cadillac showroom that doubles as a coffee bar and a dress shop. Talking about a play on Broadway. So, I mean, do we get Cadillacs? We were driven here in one. Yes. So I mean, that's that's still this. I'll take the subway tomorrow. I mean, how is it different? No, it's the real estate changes. New York is always it's always changing, and something that you love, you really can't believe it's gone, and then it's gone, and there's something new that you love that you don't know how you ever lived without it. So that's the question of New York.
But what I feel in these characters, and that didn't feel here again until very recently, is fear. That it feels to me there's a fundamental insecurity and anxiety and fear that.
And you don't feel that now?
Well, now I started to feel it again, but.
But there's still, I mean, there's fear, but I think there's also still, New York, it just feels like such a present character in this play, because there's also, on the flip side of that fear, there's the possibility. There's a possibility that there's these characters who are running from something or running to something or trying to gain, or you can be who you want to be in New York City. And I don't think that has ever changed, even though I was 2 in 1990 for a long time. But I think it's still very much a place of there's danger still, but there's possibility, and there's I think Paul, and just like these characters, they see the possibility of the selling the art and the fiction of it all, and
And the only real thing is the ephemerality of art.
Yes, yes.
As something as intangible as art is the only real thing in these people's lives.
Right. Well, that's a wonderful segue to our last slide, David. So the double-sided Kandinsky in the play, I think, has flummoxed some, mesmerized and yet flummoxed some audience members. And certainly, I think there have been entire PhD, maybe not dissertations, but certainly theses written on the meaning of the Kandinsky.
I wrote one.
Yes. So there's this and then there's the other side. It doesn't exist in real life, but
Yes, it does.
Well, but not as a two-sider, right?
No.
Right. So in the play, it's two-sided, and I want to hear from the playwright. I mean, I want to hear from. I want discuss. I want. It's an incredibly resonant image.
Well, it's very why it had to be Kandinsky was Kandinsky was the first abstract artist in a very spiritual way, that he felt that for thousands of years they've been painting landscapes and portraits and whatever, and he said, I want to paint that art had nothing more to give us. That he said, if I paint unrecognizable shapes that we can relate to, it will reveal to us unrecognizable things within us that we were not aware of. And this is all coming with the beginning, Schopenhauer and the unconscious, and Freud, and and Stravinsky in music, and Picasso in art. But it started with Kandinsky saying, if I could unlock the unconscious of humanity, what will that be? What would that do? And if I paint unrecognizable shapes that people have to put a meaning to, it'll open up unexplored passages of ourselves. So that's why it's.
Yeah, and Paul isn't a shape because everybody's bringing to him what they think they know about him.
Yeah. Or they're sort of projecting their.
Yes.
Yeah.
Their.
The best parts of yes.
Yeah.
What they need, for a person who's cons, it says a lot about the person who cons and the person who allows themselves to be conned. That shows a great need in the person who was conned to be conned.
Right, like you compliment one
I'm
another.
not interested in, people always say, oh, it must be so much fun to write about a con man. Herman Melville wrote a great book called The Confidence Man. Herman Melville wrote con men. I can't write con men. All you can write is the absence, the hole within inside people that needs to be conned, why they need to be fooled. And that to me is what is the greater need than the need to con somebody, the willingness to be conned.
Well, it's like we're all children.
No, it isn't. We're adults, unfortunately.
Well, I think now we've hit the point in our talk where I open it up to the audience, and I would ask only that you wait for the mic to be brought to you.
There's a woman in the back row whose hand shot
and
up.
I'm pointing to you, a student, but I'm asking that you wait for the mic, which I understand will be hustled over to you right now.
This is a question to Corey, because I'm an actress and I've had to memorize stuff, but I don't know how in the world what is your process for memorizing? Because you have these long, I was exhausted for you. And I'd really like to know, seriously, what your method is for memorizing that huge, huge thing that you had to memorize in the middle of the play.
On a technical level, it's repetition and just trying to, it's repetition, but then even on a technical level, it's literally parsing through what Paul is trying to do with every single word that comes out of his mouth. And I think there's something about, there was a moment I had on stage actually last night. Oh God, night before last. Oh, I did it somewhere else. But I think last week, the end of last week, where I was on stage and I started to hear the words come out of my mouth without. But at that moment, that's when I knew, okay, there's something going on. I mean, it might have been a split second, but I was going through the imagination of the thesis on Salinger, and the words just were coming out of my mouth, and I was sort of watching myself say the words, and I said, oh God, oh goodness, because I'm at the beginning of the play, and I can't, you have to find a way to stay out there, and the way I stay out there is...
You think you're going to forget? What was your worry?
It's weird, though, to have them just it's coming out and you're not even a part of it. It's like it's happening without you
and you can't stop
doing it. It's weird. It's weird.
Yeah, it's not film or television where you can be okay, let me take it back and all, it has to continue, but you can reinvest in it, and the reinvesting.
How did you get back into it?
Is these two? I swear.
I see.
And we do. I mean, we have this sort of thing every night where I'm with them, and they're, you know, either nodding in agreement or nodding in disagreement, or whatever. I don't know what it is, but there's something about that. So again, it is the repetition. It's the Skype of it all nowadays. I guess we can Skype and work on it together. But it was a lot of work to put it all in there. But the way that it comes out, I mean, it has to be connected to something. In the moment that I feel like it's not, which scared me last week. I was like, oh my God, I'm on autopilot. And these words are just spilling out of my mouth. And I know each and every one of them. And that's even more scary, that they're just coming and I'm not, you know. And then you just connect and realize what Paul is trying to do with this speech, or with this turn of phrase, or with this, you know, any affectation that he might put on, you know.
If you were in a one-man show and that happened, what would you do?
Oh God.
I'm serious.
Well, if you're in a one-man show, I think the audience, well, for the most part, sometimes the audience is a huge part of that, you know. Whether it's Anna Devere Smith, you know, like it's always that sort of back and forth. So you can always find something new to reinvest in, or it's a prop.
Of separation.
Yeah, exactly. Or it's a prop, or it's the glass of brandy that I'm holding in my.
I would just pause and go, okay.
I think that's true too. I think is time and allowing yourself to find it again. But there are a lot of words, and at the beginning, sometimes every night I'm like, this is a roller coaster, but just focus on one thing that I can do for this performance that'll, you know.
We do an extensive warm-up too at the beginning.
Warm up.
A half hour before half hour. Most of this cast, the three of us always are on stage doing a million tongue twisters and warming up our voices and because it's so important. We have to have our tongues and mouths working because it's a mouthful.
I think I can speak for the three of us. I've never been in a play where if you forget a word in a sentence that is in a speech, the whole thing can fall apart. Yes. You get it. It's maybe only a split second in your mind as you're saying, but it's shattering. It's like you're dancing on the head of a pin. And Trip always said every single word in this play is important. Whereas in some other plays that are more conversational or naturalistic, I don't think this is a naturalistic play. I think this is an abstract and expressionistic, and so it just makes the clarity of your thought and learning the words that much more important. Sorry. Yeah.
I also have questions from our Facebook Live audience, so perhaps I'll talk about technology. This one is for Allison. Do you feel, as your career progresses, a desire to choose subject matter that is more meaningful and engages the audience in a deeper conversation about the issues of our time?
I'm afraid I can't claim to have that much integrity about the choices. I mean, I do things that move me. John called and asked me to do this. I have loved John for years and love his work, and it was a no-brainer for me. I pick things because of their meaning to me, and if as a byproduct it is, you know, and enhances other people's lives, that's fantastic. But I do think about what I do and think about what I choose to do, but it's usually a lot more selfish than not. It's about what I want to do. I want to do what excites me.
Yeah, and
John's
I guess
writing excites me. What the next thing if I get excited when I read a script and I go, oh my God, I can't wait to say these lines. I can't wait to be this person. I can't wait. And Ouiza is a woman I've always wanted to play it. I never got to see Stockard do it, and I felt so. But I didn't feel intimidated by it because I knew that I couldn't do what Stockard did, and I couldn't. That's not why I have to be who I am and who I see her as. And it was exciting to me because I saw a way to play her. I saw who she was to me in my life and my life experiences. I knew what I could bring to the table.
What parts of her did you relate to?
Everything about her. The women that I grew up with, who were my grandmother's friends in Long Island, the women who threw the cocktail parties and were dressed to the nines, and we'd come into Manhattan and go see plays and go to their apartments, their fancy apartments, and go to the circus with their kids. I mean, I grew up around these ladies, and I've always had a great love for them and their style, and I couldn't be more opposite. I thought I would grow up to be one of those ladies, but I didn't in my real life. But on stage, it's great to. There's a great comfort in playing those women for me.
Yeah.
And did I even come close to answering the question?
No, you did. They're the ladies who lunch a little bit.
The ladies who lunch. I love the ladies who lunch.
She's writing a biography of Elaine.
Yes, I am.
So put a plug in.
Couldn't resist. Any more? Do we have a yes? Can you wait for the mic? Mic over here, please. Thank you.
I was wondering if 6 Degrees was written with the shape of the new house or the Beaumont in mind, or any particular space, and if it feels any different or plays any differently on a proscenium stage.
Can I introduce the phrase thrust stage that I learned today? I knew about a roundabout, I knew about a proscenium, but apparently when it's... Roundabout is,
No, that's the name of it.
in the round. Sorry, forgive me.
Yes.
But the thrust stage is three-sided, right?
Sort of.
Yeah, anyway, you take it away.
No, I mean,
Please.
maybe I did not write the play consciously for that theater. I had just had Blue Leaves had just been done there 2 years before in the which had originally been presented on a proscenium stage, and it worked terrifically on a thrust stage of the new house and then the Beaumont. So probably I had that theater in mind. But why I'm happy we're playing at, again, our producer Stuart Thompson got us the Ethel Barrymore Theater, which has the most sublime relationship of audience to theater. There's an intimacy in the. There are some theaters, theaters in New York that will not be named. That the theater is too high, the stage is too high, and so you're looking at it, or it's the relationship of the Ethel Barrymore with the size of the house and the size of the stage and the height off the floor. The relationship. All I can think about is no wonder Pal Joey and Streetcar Named Desire and Raisin in the Sun were so immediate, because it is possible to have such. And Curious Incident of the Dog last year. It's one of the most electrically alive theaters on Broadway, and the relationship of stage to audience. It's a very unusual theater. You wouldn't know it except when you're playing in it and looking at it. And I love to play in the thrust stage, but a lot of plays, that would happen on a. I mean, 6 Degrees toured for a year with Mauro Thomas and played only proscenium houses in the same production. So, but I prefer, I love the thrust stage, and I remember once, it was a lecture Peter Brook was giving, and they said, what do you use? Tell us about your alienation effects that you use to distance the audience from the theatrical experience. And Peter Brook said, why would you want to do that? I want my audience and the stage to get as close together as possible. And that's why I need actors who know how to work an audience, and in a stage setting that there are some houses in Broadway houses or off-Broadway houses that absolutely resist that kind of immediacy between actor and stage. And so I'm very blessed that Stuart got us the perfect Barrymore. So, but it's something, that's one of the nightmares of being in the theater, that you can be in rehearsal and it's working great, and you get in the stage and it's the wrong stage for it, and the stage rejects the play. And there's nothing you can do about it. The audience is in the wrong, they're sitting too low or too far back, or the theater's too wide, and there's no focus on it. The Barrymore forces all eyes forward. And it's the height of the stage, the relation to the audience is, no matter where you're sitting in the theater, you feel that closeness. Is that?
Yeah. All right, from Facebook, Do you think I guess this is directed to everyone, do you think the subject of the play is even more relevant in today's political climate?
I certainly.
Yes, speak.
I certainly think so. I think, I don't know, I just, every night, for me personally, for my character, every night we get to, like Allison said, the play sort of feels like in this hour and a half, you have a dinner party, and then you have a sort of farce, who did it, detective story, detective search, and then you go into, and then the rug gets pulled out from under your feet because you have these people sort of trying to reckon with who they are up against this painting or this art, this Paul Poitier and sort of what he's awakened in them, and it's interesting that it's a black man that is awakening this in these two Upper East Side, and I'm very aware of that. And every night I get to the line, Mrs. Louisa Kittredge, I am black. And
you can hear a pin drop in the audience. It's kind of.
It's really. It gives you, it gives you goosebumps.
It's unfortunate in this time of Black Lives Matter, where the issues in the play that were there, as horrible then, back in 1990, are even, it's
worse.
Worse today, the haves and the have-nots. The have and the have-nots. Yes, so whatever the issues in the play were, time has not healed them, it's only heightened them.
Right. And it's you wrote this play before Rodney King and before, I think, and before, where we've come, and it's really scary, because you talk about a young man, a young black gay man on top of all of that, who ultimately becomes a statistic again. It's a sort of repetition of, and it's scary that 27 years later this story is still, and even more so, really potent, and I'm really aware of that.
In this age of immigration, the irony of the play is, 6 Degrees is that we're all separated by 6 other people, unless you happen to be part of a minority.
Right.
Where it's easy to vanish and fall between the cracks and vanish.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I kept thinking about the children and how, the children's, their rebellion has not changed, but perhaps, their particular grievances or issues might have. For example, now there might be gender issues, or like
They're in the play.
Yeah, they are. But homosexuality is, I think, more accepted. So there's progress there. But now there's a whole spectrum of. So do we have another question from the audience? How about over there in the blue?
Hi, I guess this is a question primarily for John. And although I'm old enough to have seen the original production, I did not get a chance to do that. But for the past quarter of a century, I've seen the film adaptation countless times. And I couldn't help mentally, when hearing certain lines that obviously all come from the original play, my mind taking me back to the film. And I was just curious if, when you're reintroducing the play, having that 25 years in between where you have a film that's out there exposed to so many more people, does it ever come into your consciousness about lines that you might change to either avoid or enhance that? Do you see that either an asset or a liability?
I'm not allowed to. I don't believe in rewriting. I think you have an obligation at that time. I always think about Henry James. At the end of his life, rewrote all his early books for his New York edition, and they weren't good. The rewrites weren't as good. He was a better writer, but they weren't as fresh. No, a play is a marker for its time. This is what it was like for me to be alive in 1990. And I have no right to go in years later and start mucking around with that. You have to trust to see what time does to the play. For example, in House of Blue Leaves, when it came out in 71 it opened, and somebody trying to kill the Pope was a thing of fun. You just said, oh, how did the people come up with these kooky ideas? The play got it. But a kook, imagine somebody wanting to blow up the Pope. Well, I was in Times Square one day and I saw Pope, somebody shoots the Pope, will he live or die? And I never go see my stuff after, but it was playing up in Great Barrington in summer stock, and I went up to see how that effect of the Pope act of reality coming in on the play would affect the play. What was extraordinary is where people before watching the play, this family saying, "Oh, what a kooky, funny thing! Oh, what those wonderful, nutty people." The minute that the addition of history, historical reality, came into the play, a wall shattered, and the audience, as we were talking before, the audience in the play became even closer because the reality made the play even more surreal. Nobody ever called the play kooky and cute again. And history had helped the play. History had served the play. And I think the same thing has happened to this, is that I'm more interested in my obligations to see what time has done to the play rather than what I can do to the play, because I'd only screw it up. Is that,
yeah, that was wonderful. We have, I think, time for maybe one more
Let's
question.
get the man right there.
Yeah. Mike?
You, hold your hand up. You, yes.
There we go.
Thank you very much. 6 Degrees of Separation is a play that made me, I grew up in Atlanta. This is a play that made me want to come to New York. But
is that good or bad? Are you here to threaten me? You just say yes.
I know. I'm very curious. I grew up reading this play, and I always wondered, people that I knew, I can imagine certain audiences making the actor who played Paul Potier the star, regardless of billing, and making the character of Paul Potier the hero. And I always wondered, what is perspective, what kind of reactions has 6 Degrees of Separation garnered from outside the Northeastern United States? Where else has it played, and how have audiences and critics reacted to it?
I don't know. I don't read reviews. I know there was a production I wish I had seen, but I only found about it, is that there was a production at the Barrymore Theater, which is one of the leading African-American theaters, the first African-American theater in Cleveland, I think it is. And they did a production of 6 Degrees with an entirely black cast, and Paul was cast by a white man.
Wow.
So I have no idea, and I'm glad I didn't see that, but I don't, always was curious. But I don't read, I don't follow reactions to the play. Chicken? Sure.
No, it's whatever you need to function, I think. And I guess we have one more. I don't think we have time for. Well, maybe I'll just do one more from Facebook. And from Elisa, she asks.
Oh, Elisa's good.
Elisa wants to know, how has doing the play changed over the decades since it first premiered?
That's the same question.
You're right. So
poor Alicia. I'll talk to you later.
See you on Facebook.
Yeah, I think the answer to that is buy the ticket to the current production at the Barrymore Theater. Ethel Barrymore, not Drew Barrymore, for those who might be confused.
Same family.
And it's absolutely wonderful, and I want to thank you all for coming and for speaking so beautifully about this wonderful play.